This is Jason Leopold reporting for Truthout. Valerie Plame Wilson was a covert CIA operative whose undercover status was leaked to a handful of journalists in July 2003 in an attempt to discredit her husband, Joe Wilson, who accused the White House of manipulating pre-war Iraq intelligence. Do you think that Dick Cheney or President Bush declassified your covert status and leaked it to reporters?
We don't know that for sure, but what we do know are the words of the Special Prosecutor Fitzgerald, who said there was a cloud over the office of the Vice President.
Right.
And don't forget, of course, one of the charges on which Mr. Libby was convicted was obstruction of justice.
Correct.
Which means Fitzgerald never could get exactly to the bottom of what happened or who knew. He pointed out that there was certainly a conspiracy within the White House to undermine and discredit Joe Wilson. But I found it interesting during the trial that one of many things that came out was that the Office of the Vice President kept a 3-ring binder on Joe Wilson.
Right.
And this was during May and June of 2003, just as the insurgency was getting underway. And I found that so odd, like as though they didn't have enough to worry about. Did
George Tenet personally weigh in on this, as far as you know?
Certainly not with me.
Okay,
no,
because have you read his book? He only devotes just a few pages to the ordeal, and he is not very complimentary of your husband Joe Wilson and the politics surrounding everything. What is your opinion on that?
I think Mr. Tenet has his own set of issues and things that he needs to answer to.
Such as? Having
said that, I was just going to say that the only senior CIA official to whom I ever spoke was the director of operations, the DO, Jim Pavitt, who retired the day after George Tenet. And it was a 10-minute how you doing chat shortly after this whole thing blew up.
You said George Tenet has some issues that he needs to deal with, such as?
This is just my personal opinion. I think he had hoped that his book would sort of restore his reputation and clarify where he stood on the rationale for going to war and the intelligence and the run-up and so forth. And I think it failed to do any of that. It only muddied the water further.
Do you think that George Tenet saw the oral report that your husband had given to the CIA briefer when he returned from Niger?
When Joe returned from his trip to Niger, there were 2 reports officers there to meet him, one being the one who had initially suggested him for the trip. They debriefed him that evening in our home. I was taking care of our then 3-year-old twins, was not in on that. We sat down for a takeout dinner. It was purely social, and then they went off. The next day, the reports officer showed me the draft of the intel report that he had done as a courtesy. I did not edit it, I did not change it. And it was disseminated, we assumed, through the regular channels, off to the Pentagon, the Office of the Vice President. I mean, there was a standard list of addressees who get those sort of things.
And do you think that President Bush or Dick Cheney knowingly lied about the so-called 16 words in the State of the Union address?
I think there's no doubt that they twisted and manipulated and cherry-picked the intelligence.
On May 12, 2003, I reported that Karl Rove had been indicted. And that information came from individuals who were very reliable and supplied us with some good information for some time as we were covering the story. Clearly, Karl Rove is not in jail. What do you think happened to Karl Rove? Did he strike a deal with the special prosecutor? Was there a quid pro quo?
No, I have no further insight. Fitzgerald and his entire team were extremely professional. They called us when they had a question, but we were certainly not brought in, or that would have been completely inappropriate. So we have no idea. Other than we know, he was before the grand jury 5 times.
Well, what is your opinion on that?
I wouldn't want to go before a grand jury 5 times.
Yeah.
And a couple things. I guess finally he told enough to satisfy the prosecutor. Again, Fitzgerald was not able to get to the bottom of what exactly happened. Couldn't exactly connect all the dots. And the Intelligence Identities Protection Act, the IIPA, is poorly written. The bar is too high, and I do hope in the future along with the other many things that Congress needs to do, that they do revisit that and tighten it up so this doesn't happen in the future.
Do you think that there was any quid pro quo in regards to Karl Rove and special prosecutor?
Oh, I have no idea.
What do you think, though? You know, as you hear, he's before a grand jury 5 times.
I think Fitzgerald, even his critics will say he's really smart,
right.
He's really good, he pursued this the best he could.
Yeah.
And that's all that Joe and I could ask, that it was a robust and
right.
fair investigation. I have no insight into whatever transpired between you know, one lawyer and another.
Just getting back to Karl Rove again for a moment, apparently his attorney received a letter, you know, stating from Patrick Fitzgerald stating that he was not going to be indicted, or in fact, we actually don't know what the letter says.
No.
Do you know what the letter says?
No.
Have you seen a letter?
No.
Have you spoken to Patrick Fitzgerald? Has he, you know, offered you any insight as to what happened with Karl Rove?
No, he has not. Maybe some point well into the future when this is all behind us, but I think that it's maybe pieces are still moving. Of course, with the president's commutation of Mr. Libby's sentence, getting Mr. Libby to cooperate with the prosecutor in the future has clearly been hindered.
Yeah. What else for you remains in terms of some unanswered questions?
Well, a couple things. I'd like to know who originally passed my name from the CIA through and to the office of the Vice President, and under what circumstances? How did that happen? I'd like to know, why did Novak go with my maiden name, Plame, in his original article? I always thought that was strange.
Now, can you explain like how he would have?
No, I can't.
Okay.
I have no idea. When
I
married, I took my married name. And
Valerie Wilson is what is.
That's correct.
Who you were known
and
as.
then he used Valerie Plame. So I don't have any insight into how that happened.
Was it just the CIA who knew that? Obviously, that was your maiden name.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, the CIA. It was only the CIA that knew that I worked for them, and my maiden name was Plame. And the other thing I'd love to know is, what did President Bush know about all of this?
Yeah. Can you describe the threats that you were receiving? Were they threats on your life?
I can't go into detail for obvious reasons.
Is that the reasons? Are they classified? Are they secret? Or?
I think for security reasons. It doesn't make any sense to provide more information than I really should. But I will say this. In the spring of 2004, we received some very serious, very credible threats against me, and curiously enough, against Tenet, Ashcroft, and Rove. And it was so serious that I finally went to the head of CIA security and requested additional security on our residence, because that's where we were most vulnerable, of course. And the agency denied it. And I can tell you, I was heartbroken because they make a big deal out of being a family and so forth. The other 3 targets, Ashcroft, Tenet, and Rove, already had 24/7 security, 2 from work, 2 from their kids' school, whatever. I had none of that, and it felt very lonely. And of course, as a parent, your child's security is paramount.
You said that you requested additional security, so you had
no,
some security?
I mean, no, I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
Okay.
Any security on my residence.
So they denied you any security whatsoever? They
did say, at the time we were living in Washington, D.C., that they would have more patrol cars go by our house.
What was their reason for denying you security?
They did not give me one.
They just said no.
Denied.
Denied. And they knew that there was a threat.
Absolutely. They knew exactly the dimensions of the threat.
Are you under the same sort of threat today? I mean, do you feel that you have to look over your shoulder as you travel?
I'm aware of it, certainly. There are a lot of deranged people out there. It's no doubt anymore that, at least I used to work for the CIA. We've moved out of Washington, D.C. to New Mexico, which is a beautiful part of the world.
Yeah.
So I'm very conscious of it, but it's not quite the same as being in Washington.